application program interfaces. Now, there's a geeky term if you ever heard one. Technically what it is I have something and I want to have my program be able to talk to your program. Now, we came up with APIs, back when I was working at Apple years ago, so that, for example, a back-end database might be able to talk to some front-end thing that draws a nice graphic. But today, this concept of an API, of being able to hand off data seamlessly from a web service or a company round robin, is actually enabling things like business development to happen very easily without contracts and across enterprises. And I think that's a fundamental technology that's going on here. It's the API that lets you cobble together a web service, right? When we talk about a mashup today, what we're really saying is I have an idea for something, and I use a little bit of maps from Google and a little bit of data from the Department of Commerce and a little bit of maybe designing something from a firm that lets me print out cups or whatever, and I mash that stuff up. Then I've got a cup company that'll give you a customized cup based on commerce data. On a profound level, you see this going on in companies. Companies like CBS buy up a bunch of media properties. How do you integrate a bunch of media properties? It's expensive. But actually, if they all have an API, you can go build new stuff quickly. Companies like the New York Times actually want their audience to extend what they're doing. If they create an API, all sorts of bloggers and social networking people will use their data. That's a good thing to do. You also see it in business-to-business arenas. So essentially this notion of taking systems, making them object-oriented, letting them talk to each other so that any business idea we have we can implement pretty quickly is a fundamental change and a lot cheaper than, say, the way we did things in Web 1.0, where you had to raise $20 million and write stuff from scratch, or God forbid, a lot cheaper than back when it was just proprietary stuff you got from IBM. You could say that the history of IT is the history of the story of liberation. Everybody gets to be a producer now. Customers get to create content. Your employees get to create and co-create with you. We're bringing down the walls of isolated companies that make stuff and consumers as receivers of stuff. And we're suddenly having this co-production environment where literally anybody can be a media company. After all, every kid who has a Facebook page is kind of a brand on their own. And all of your customers can actually become part of an ecosystem with you. And that's what happens when everybody's part of a network. People start behaving together. So as we get into this connected environment where we can share and talk to each other, and suddenly 60% of kids create things, and the natural expectation is you get to design stuff and control what it is, something very interesting is going to happen where suddenly as we connect with institutions, they're going to actually respond to us almost in much more of a human way or a way with much more meaning. And we're beginning to see that. It's almost humorous to think, how is it that a shoe manufacturer can have a relationship with me? And yet if we look at Nike Plus, the minute that they gave you that little device that let the Nike talk to your iPod and keep track of your run, the unexpected thing was runners went online 3 times a week to see how they were doing, because you see it's a game, because they're competitive, and suddenly advertising costs went down 58% because they were left with that communications out there. And with enterprises, it's actually, I think, having the effect of being more humanizing for people who work there, because you actually have to listen and take them seriously. And a disruptive effect is, as you get this much more out of people, you're probably wiping out a lot of middle management and such. So what we're really left with is the social effect of all this. Very interesting transformations on the nature of how brands communicate, on how enterprises work. And this is something we haven't seen before. If you go back to the 1960s, brands turned to things like typography. They went to the Helvetica typeface to look more friendly, more authentic, more open. Today, we don't do it with typefaces. We actually go ahead and do it. There's a whole generation that knows nothing but this kind of connected communications with other people that's responsive. And they're expecting this of their brands and their enterprises who are trying to keep up. Actually, it's affected the world of brands. After all, branding is about control. That's where the word comes from. So the concept of strategically giving up control and letting the audience co-create is difficult, but you get more value, because if your audience is more engaged, things are better. It's also affecting the very nature of the enterprise. If you suddenly take down some of the walls between the enterprise and get the best ideas from beyond the borders. Now, in a way, it's obvious. The classic question people ask here is, well, do you think all the smartest people in the world work for, and put your answer here, Best Buy, the Department of Commerce, Procter & Gamble? And when the answer is no, you tend to build a network around that to get a whole lot of ideas, but this challenges the idea of a traditional corporate wall. And most interestingly, it's affecting the world of entertainment. because, you think of a TV show and it's a one-way thing, but now they're learning how to engage and become two-way. It's the other reason that things like casual games is becoming as big as television itself, because people love things that engage and involve play.